Good day, my Arda scholars. I hope you all are doing well and looking forward to listening to another great video. Well, at least I think it's going to be another great video. There you go. A little bit of false bravado and a little bit of confidence and hope that you guys enjoy this as much as I do. Why am I going to enjoy this? Well, that's simple. I'm actually talking about the event that I ran in February, as you can tell by the video title. That was the fourth iteration of my 1,000 point annual event. And I have to say, I feel like that is something to be really happy and somewhat proud of. I don't want to have too much hubris and take pride in it, but I was really glad that this event that I started in 2021 has continued to do well with its fourth year running now and several different ways of running it. So I started in 2021, and I think that was probably the best one because I had, at that time, 32 players show up. So if you're going to measure an event by its attendance as a metric for whether or not it did well or not, that was the best run event that I had. Now, personally, I don't think it was my best run event. I think that last year's 1,000 point event was my best, but this year did pretty darn well as well. as well, like that. I had 24 folks show up. This year, I took on the theme of the Battle of 5 Armies for the 1,000 point event, which is what I've been doing for the last 4 years, obviously. Sorry, I had a script for this, and I'm sitting here looking at it, and it's just like not really jiving well. So that's why I kind of sound automatic. So I think I'm just going to throw it away and just shoot from the hip, which is what I usually do for these videos, and they seem to turn out better that way. So that's what I'm going to do. Let's just kind of shoot from the hip. So it was Battle of 5 Armies themed, which has been the idea for me going back and forth over the years. So the first year and the third year, the odd number of years, were Great Battle of the Carolinas themed, which is the Battle of Pelennor Fields, because that's kind of like the big battle for the Third Age when it comes to what we know specifically and have abundance of resources for and visual aids with. And then the second and fourth year, our even number years, have been Battle of 5 Armies themed, where my prizes and my theme have been more like that. So this year, obviously being the fourth year, was Battle of 5 Armies, as I've already said. So it was actually a very interesting event. So what I want to do is kind of talk to you guys about how I set it up, how I ran it, like what scenarios we played, how I picked those, and then also a little bit about the armies. Now, obviously, I'm not going to go super in depth with the armies because you know my policy on not putting out army lists. But that doesn't mean I can't talk to you about what lists were there. So this was 3 rounds, 1,000 points, obviously. So the 3 rounds, I did that a little bit different this time. So there has been 2 primary ways of dictating how scenarios are played at events. The older, but nothing wrong with it way of the TO dictates the event, or dictates the scenario. And then we have the new and popular, but also flawed system of veto style. Now, I do and I don't like veto, as you could tell, obviously, by my fact that I call it flawed. And, of course, the fact that I've talked about it before and kind of been like, yeah, it's cool, but you kind of, yeah. I won't get too much into it. Maybe I'll make it its own video, That might not be a bad idea. If you like that idea, leave a comment below. There you go. There you go. We're going to have a little bit of interaction here. So if you guys like the idea of hearing a video about, the new veto system and our thoughts, because I'll pull in some other folks, leave a comment below. So those are like the 2 primary ways of scenarios being chosen for an event as of now. TO dictated and veto. Now, there's kind of like a subcategory that you could put under TO dictated, and that falls under the randomly rolled section. I don't know what you guys think. Do you consider that to be its own thing or what? I still kind of feel like that's somewhat TO driven, because if the TO rolls and he doesn't like the idea of a scenario at an event, he can always just re-roll it if he wants to. I've also seen it where the TO has picked 3 scenario pools and then randomly rolled for those scenario pools to cut down the excess amount of dice rolls and Also, it kind of helps keep the paperwork in check, because that's one of the biggest things as a TO is like you want to say that everybody in this game will have a match play guide, but we are all not independently wealthy. That's why 3D printing is a thing. It's a cheap way to find replacements for models so you're not getting scalped. Same thing for when it comes to a TO dictating scenarios. It's much simpler for a TO to just print out 3 or 5 individual sheets if you're doing a 3-round or a 5-round, or 6 if you're doing a 2-day 6-rounder, or maybe 12 potential scenarios, as opposed to having to print out copies of 18 different scenarios and have them handy. That's going to cut into your pocket, and it's also going to cut into your time, because it takes a lot of work to prep for an event. So those are really the 3 different ways. I put it as 2, but I'll go ahead and say it's a third way, is randomly rolling. Well, I decided for this event that I thought it would be a really cool idea to factor all 3 of those in. And that's why I say there's kind of like 3 different ways. The subcategory, randomly rolling, it goes under TO dictated, whatever. But I went ahead and decided to do all 3 ways for this event. I randomly rolled for one, I dictated one as TO, and I let veto be the other. Now, I went ahead and had a bit of a hand in dictating what scenario pools we were playing, because at 1,000 points, 2.5 hours is pretty much the max you're going to get to play, and you're really stretching getting games to end naturally at 2.5 hours, unless you can find a way to help push that by getting scenarios in that start rolling to see if the game ends at 50%, because those usually help speed up a game. Players are a little more judicious with their movement if they can see a way to grab a game early and then go break their opponent, or conversely, they could break themselves by being reckless and hoping the game ends. Now, that's not obviously going to happen, because I've played games before where someone's broken and we just rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled and the game never ended. But it's more likely than somebody playing the quarter. A majority of the scenario, I think it's pretty much 50-50 for whether games end at a quarter or on a roll of 1 or 2 when someone's broken. But at 1,000 points, you can assume that most Army lists are going to be in the mid-30s to potentially even as high as 60 or 70 models, which quartering someone at that, it's going to take a lot. And that's pretty much what I saw for these Armies lists. Most Army lists were at the minimum near that 40 model mark. I had a few that were in the upper 30s, but again, those armies, they were more elite troop based, so those elite troops naturally have more killing and staying power, which means they're still going to have that issue of being quartered. So I went ahead and removed Maelstrom from at all being a possibility, because I'm not a fan of Maelstrom as it is written in the book. There's a huge disadvantage to being priority player. It's 3 out of 18 scenarios, so that's a 1/6% chance that you pull those. 1 out of 6. So yeah, it's just the one time that being priority player actually really sucks, because you come on and then your opponent can completely dictate how a game goes by spending as much of their resources as they want to cherry pick part of your army to go after and destroy. And that's usually the case that I've seen when those scenarios are played and the TO plays it rules as written. Now, not all TOs do this, but I think it really needs to be eroded at this point, where you do alternating. So, I'm not going to go crazy into Maelstrom scenarios, but for those who are not familiar with them, quick summary is neither army's on the board. Technically turn 1, nobody's on the board. After your end of your movement phase, you roll for every warband and then they come on, which means all your warbands come on turn 1 at the end of your movement phase, and then your opponent has their movement phase, and then they roll for all their warbands. So if you're already on the board, it kind of sucks. So anyway, I got rid of that pool. I'm like 4 minutes into talking why I got rid of it, but you guys get the point. I got rid of that pool, and then I chose to get rid of object scenario pools, or capture objectives. I can't remember, I can't think of what it's called. Hold objective scenarios. There we go. So pool 1 and pool 2 were gone. And someone probably listening is going, wait, hold objective. Isn't that like capture and control and domination? Yeah, those two and breakthrough. Well, those tend to be the tried and true scenarios that you see at an event. And nothing against them. Those are 3 of my favorite scenarios. I really like all 3 of them. Probably capture and control, breakthrough, and then domination if I had to rank them. But they're very common. You see them a lot. They're also very much, an easy scenario to test a new army with without having to go too crazy, just to kind of see if an army synergizes well together. I think capture and control and Lords of Battle are the 2 most commonly practiced scenarios when you're trying to learn a new army. The objectives are pretty simple and straightforward. There's nothing super crazy you're trying to do. You're not doing like Fog of War where you're writing stuff down. There's not a lot of crazy movement in it when it comes to things like Storm the Camp. You're pretty much just deploying at a 50% deployment and going at it. So 3 great scenarios, in my opinion, for trying to learn the game. Again, capture and control probably being the best. But they're very common. So I wanted to run an object scenario or objective scenario that wasn't very common. So I decided to cherry pick having pool 3 as object scenarios be the one that I cherry picked a scenario for. And I chose retrieval. So retrieval was the first scenario of the day. And I chose it because I could set up the objective markers on all the boards before everybody arrived. So you could kind of get a hint of what scenario you were going to play once you walked in the door, because again, I kept these scenarios secret. And it also gave me as a TO the ability to make sure that I set up boards in a way that it wasn't going to interfere with the objective round 1 or there on and forth, because that's something that you end up running into if you do those like object type scenarios where you have to put a marker like in the second or third round. It's like, hey, this wasn't an issue in first round because it was Lords of Battle and we just killed each other, but now I got to put this marker here, and you've got like a 2 foot tall, model on the board. We'll go with the tower from Esgaroth for Bard. We've actually got a nice 3D printed terrain piece of that, but if you put it in the wrong spot, you could completely block where that objective could go. So doing it in round 1, let me come in, take the time, set the boards up, adjust as needed, get those put down. Of course, that's not how it worked out, but in theory, it works out great. So yeah. So that was round 1. I chose object scenarios. Retrieval, obviously, as I just got done talking about. And retrieval is one of my favorite scenarios. I really like it. I've played it, I want to say at least 3 times in the last dozen and a half games that I've played. And each time I play it, every time I'm just like, man, this is a really fun game. It's one of those things where you can deploy close, so that if you are fighting a shooty heavy army, you don't have to worry about going half the field to go get your opponent in something like to the death. You can deploy back a little bit if you're one of those armies that wants to take a turn or 2 to set up things with magic, or set up things with shooting, or set up things because you have like a movement heavy piece, like a not a ballista. I'm thinking ballista, not a catapult. Good Lord, chariot. There we go. Don't know how I forgot that because there's a number of chariots at the event. But yeah, there we go. This is why I don't do scripts. I think it's funnier. You guys are probably listening to this going, dude, seriously, how can you forget chariot? Because it's funny. It's funnier that way. Unscripted, raw, look, they make the best interviews. They make the best videos. So yeah, I just really like retrieval. And I felt that it was a good round 1 scenario to do also, because it is a little bit movement intensive. And round 1 is, I've got that hour and 15-ish minutes between round 1 and round 2 for lunch, which means I can give the round 1 players a chance to extend their games a little bit. Not like an hour, but it's normally one of those things where it's like, okay, it's, the round's over. Finish your turn. Do not start another one. technically I play dice down 2.5 hours. I need to get the scores in. I need to get things put together quickly so I can get the information back out to all the players. Quicker I get that stuff in, the quicker it gets back out, the better chance we have to stay on target for time. And again, 2.5 hours, you're playing 7.5 hours of game time. That's an hour and a half more than a typical 2-hour event. So you're usually looking at events ending at like 6:30, 7 o'clock. Add an hour and a half on. I mean, we were getting done around 8 o'clock. It's kind of rough, especially for folks who are driving. And I had 2 folks that drove all the way back to Virginia from where I'm at in North Carolina. So they had a 6-hour drive ahead of them, approximately. I'm not exactly sure how long it was, but still. I don't want them having to leave at 10 o'clock at night and make a 6-hour drive getting home at 4 o'clock in the morning. As it was, they already got home at like 2 or 3. So we have round 1 set, it's retrieval. Round 2. I went ahead and let my wife roll this. So the results are all on her. So let's do a quick recap. Scenario pools 1 and 2 are out because I went ahead and removed them from possibly being played. And not only did I remove them, I actually let everybody know that, hey, we will not be playing a Maelstrom scenario. Hey, we will not be playing a capture objective, hold objective scenario. So that meant that they knew kind of what not to have to worry about practicing for, which is nice. I think that's something you should do as a TO. You know, kind of give guys a hint. It's not necessary, but I think it kind of helps, like, amp people up. It gets the hype going. It keeps people interested and be like, oh, yeah, that's right. I got this event in a couple weeks, you know. Yeah, look at the TO. He's letting me know what I don't have to worry about. Sweet, I can worry about practicing other games. So I think it's just a cool little element to include for an event, which is, again, why I think this year's 1,000-point event was the best of all time. Okay, here we go. So that was a minute on that. So with 1, 2, and 3 taken care of, 3, 4, or 4, 5, and 6 were what was left. So basically it just became a D3 roll. So I let my wife roll it, and she rolled a 2. All right, so that meant pool 4 was 1 or 2. So kill the enemy scenarios is what we played. She made fun of me like, wow, look at that. You know, she made a whole thing like, you rolled terribly. I'm going to roll better than you. She rolled my die and she rolled a 2. I was like, ha, suck it. Then she's like, well, yeah, well, watch this. I'll roll better. She rolled it again. She rolled another 2. Yeah, I was like, ha, suck it. So 2 2s means we played pool 4 and Lords of Battle. That was the randomly rolled 4 scenario for round 2. Great scenario, I think, for round 2. Perfect, because it's one of those ones where once somebody's broken, the game could randomly end, which can really help for a TO when trying to, again, like I said, keep track of scores. And more likely that the scores aren't all going to come at you at once. At the end, they're going to trickle in slowly, which is cool. So finally, I went ahead and picked for round 3 unique scenarios because pool 5 is cool. Maneuvering scenarios are all right. Divide and Conquer, I actually like that one. Storm the Camp, not a big fan of that. That's a lot of movement, but it's not as bad, in my opinion, as Reconnoiter, because Reconnoiter can be one of those ones where you could literally have a warband not come onto the table until like turn 3 or 4, or whatever turn it is that they auto come on. So yeah, so those are our 3 scenarios, sort of 3 scenarios, or 3 pools at least. We had round 1 being object scenarios, retrieval. Round 2, Lords of Battle, kill the enemy scenarios. And then round 3 was pool 6, unique scenarios, and that was the veto style one. So yeah, those are my 3 rounds. How I picked it all out, that was a lot of time to tell you all that. I'm sorry. You guys probably skipping around. So moving on from there, we had 24 people sign up, like I said. So there were 14 good armies and 10 evil. So not exactly 50-50, but not bad. It's not horribly skewed. I've run events before where it's been like, you know, if there was 24 people, it'd be like 16-8, which is much more skewed. One thing I found interesting was there was only 4 LLs, Legendary Legions, that were at the event. One of those being my own, and I was playing Ringer at this event because I had somebody unfortunately drop out, which was too bad. I really wish he'd been able to make it. Tim, if you're watching this, we missed having you there. I think you would have had a blast. But 2 of the LLs were the same. It was the Host of the Dragon Emperor, and this was pre the 30-point increase, which I really don't think is that big of a deal anyway, as a quote-unquote nerf. if anything, it just makes the game, that army, a little more balanced. Uh, yeah, but and then the other one was Blackgate Opens, and then mine was Grey Company, which I don't really count because I was playing Ringer. So yeah, it was pretty cool that didn't have a lot of LLs. That's something where, as of late, it seems to be skewing more 50-50. Like, you'll see events where it's like 60-40 in favor of, and then 40-60 in favor of, or not in favor of, whatever you want to call it. So it kind of like has been bouncing back and forth, where about half of the armies taken were LLs. I don't know if this is indicative of the what do you call it, community as a whole right now, where they're not doing LLs so much. But I found it very interesting that out of 24 people, I only had 4 LLs. I mean, that's the lowest amount of LLs I've ever had at an event since like pre-LLs being invented. I've always had at least, I don't know, I wouldn't say, I'd say at least 33% usually. So that's pretty crazy. But then again, when I looked at the way some folks built their lists, I wasn't all that surprised that was the outcome, because of the fact that folks looked more at building for things that really synergized together, as opposed to LLs, which limited what you well, they do, it's not past tense, they limit what you can take in an army, but give you a few bonuses to make up for it. At 1,000 points, you're really not worried about trying to squeeze out a whole bunch of extra bonuses. You're really looking at what works really, really well together to help cover a weakness, even at the detriment of maybe giving up army bonuses, which there were a few armies here that were yellow allies. And I mean, one of them, the first place winner, was a yellow ally. It was Kingdoms of Khazad-dûm and Lothlorien. So a combination that is kind of, it's I wouldn't say it's crazy, but it's not something you would, it's uncommon. Let's put it that way. People talk about it. I know it's talked about because I've talked about it before, but it's not one of those ones where it's like, yeah, I see that a lot. No, I've thought about that, but I've never really thought about doing it, is more what it is. So I found that to be very interesting as well. So another thing I found interesting was folks who played armies that fit the theme. So as I said, the theme of this event was Battle of 5 Armies. That being said, I did a little award based off of, an army list that was, thematic for Battle of 5 Armies. So I was looking for anything from like Azog's Legion, Azog's Hunters. I wouldn't say Pits of Dol Guldur, because that was more, that was at the end of Desolation of Smaug. But I might have considered it. But Survivors of Lake Town, Brandrew's Halls, Iron Hills, those are the ones that I was looking for. Champions of Erebor, stuff like that. I probably would even have considered the Necromancer, as potentially being eligible for that. That being said, of the 24 armies, only 7 of them fit the theme. Most of the armies, there are more than 7 Hobbit armies, don't get me wrong, but most of the armies actually went more towards I guess my normal, or my odd year theme, which is Pelennor Fields. So I found that to be kind of interesting as well, that folks were not so much caring about the theme, they were more caring about what is an army that works really well together, which, that kind of speaks to the current status of the community as well. Folks are looking to make armies that work very well. They don't really care too much about how the event is themed, which is kind of sad because, as you all know, I'm a theme-based player and I'm a theme-based event maker. That being said, the winning army was a Survivors Lake Town Iron Hills ally, which is pretty cool. And it's our good buddy Dan from the LTR SPG team. So good for him. And that was completely player based. I printed out a sheet and put on there who was eligible. And so that was completely peer driven, which was really cool. The best painted good went to an Ent army, and the best painted evil went to one of the Host of the Dragon Emperor armies. So, yeah, we had good showing all around. It's funny, the two guys that won Best Painted Good and Evil are actually good friends, and they got into the game together, and so at the same time, I thought that was very interesting as well. But they definitely, and that was also, again, peer-driven, but they definitely had some of the best armies there, and I'm not trying to knock anything away when I'm saying like they were good friends, and saying their skill for painting those armies, top shelf. They rightfully earned that win. So, or that voting. Yeah, so there you go. That's my 3 scenarios. Good painted armies, but evil painted armies. Let's see, what else? I guess I could talk about my top 5 real quick. And I'll probably wrap it up from there. I didn't want this to be too long, and I'm already pushing like a half hour, which is too bad. And no surprise, of course. So I did a top 5. I had always planned to do a top 5 of this, even when I was only expecting this to be like 14 to 16 players. So the fact that we had 24, the top 5 was like even better, because top 3 is common. It's very common to see a top 3. Like that is what everybody does. The podium is first, second, and third. But I feel like 4th and 5th, they're always like right there. Like one more roll needed to go their way, one more thing, it's kind of like racing. Like the guy that comes in 4th or 5th in a close race, he just needed that pit stop to be 10 seconds, not 10 seconds, that's too long, half a second faster, something like that. So I did have a top 5. So, and I called it the Ishtari, the council, because of the fact that there are 5 wizards, and I'm having 5 places. So we had a white wizard, a gray wizard, a brown wizard, and then blue wizard 1 and blue wizard 2. So I already talked. I said the white wizard was the Kingdom of Khazad-dûm Lothlorien ally, which was really cool. Then the second place, the gray wizard, was Azog's Legion, and he had the Signal Tower, which was pretty cool. You don't really see the Signal Tower because it's 200 points. But, I mean, at 1,000 points, you can just take an 800-point army and bump it up. The third place was Varings of Khan. Pretty cool. He had 5 heroes. I want to say they were all on chariots. I think there were 3 kings and 2 chieftains or something like that. So a lot of chariots running around. And then I know he had at least 1 charioteer. Might have had a second one. I can't remember the list exactly. But pretty cool. He came in 3rd place, took the brown wizard. And I'll say this, this is kind of another reason why I think like having a top 5, especially at a bigger, points or a bigger number of players like this, top 3 all went undefeated. So you're talking about 3 guys that all played and went 3-0. That's nothing to laugh at. So, yeah, their separation for first, second, and third literally came down to tournament points. And then Blue Wizard 1 was a Rivendell army allied with Numenor. So you had a Last Alliance, which is, that's pretty common at 1,000 points as well, I've seen. Folks like to be able to get Elendil in there. Folks like to be able to get Elrond in there. Folks like to be able to get, Gil-galad in there. So, pretty cool. And then 5th place in the second Blue Wizard was Survivors of Lake Town allied with Halls of Thranduil, which I think is a really good combo because you can put some weak survivors on your front line and then support them with Fight 5 guys, have Thranduil nearby, and give those guys out of the second line +1 to wound with his army bonus. So very good armies there for the top 5. 2 of them being theme based for the event, and both of those receiving votes for best themed, which is cool. And then the second one, Azog's Legion one, actually received votes for best painted as well. So yeah, there you go. Top 5, what rounds and scenarios we played, why. Yeah, best paint and everything. I think that's pretty much everything to say in what was supposed to be a quick wrap up of the event. So hopefully you guys enjoy this little talk real quick about real quick again, almost half hour about the event, and I hope you guys can eventually make it to an event. And yeah, look forward. I'm gonna probably do another couple of videos about the event, some with guests, some with just me, and hopefully you enjoy those as well. Please like, share, subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care. Enjoy MESBG hobby.